Have you ever noticed something strange about relationships? Sometimes the kindest, most thoughtful, emotionally aware people end up surrounded by the most emotionally draining ones. You see it happen all the time. The empathetic friend who somehow keeps dating narcissists. The supportive partner who constantly ends up being manipulated. The emotionally intelligent person who repeatedly finds themselves in relationships where they give everything while the other person barely gives anything back. And when this pattern repeats often enough, a painful question eventually appears. ISSOMETHINGWRONGWITHME. Why does this keep happening to me? But what if the truth is the exact opposite? What if the very qualities that make you compassionate, patient, and emotionally intelligent are the same qualities that make you an ideal target for certain personalities? Because psychologists have noticed a pattern that appears again and again in toxic relationships. Toxic personalities rarely choose their partners randomly. More often than not, they choose them strategically, not always consciously, but instinctively. They are drawn toward people who are patient, understanding, forgiving, and willing to see the good in others. And while those traits are beautiful in healthy relationships, they can become dangerous in the wrong ones. To understand why this happens, we first need to talk about something psychologists sometimes call the empathy trap. One of the biggest myths about toxic relationships is the idea that manipulation works best on weak people. Most people imagine manipulation as something that only affects individuals who are naive, insecure, or easily controlled. But the reality is often very different. Manipulation tends to work best on empathetic people because empathy changes the way you interpret other people's behavior. When someone behaves badly toward you, most people think something like this: they disrespected me. But someone with high empathy often interprets the situation very differently. They must be going through something difficult. They probably didn't mean it that way. They're just struggling right now. This instinct to understand rather than judge is normally a sign of emotional maturity. But in a toxic dynamic, it can become the exact mechanism that keeps you stuck. Because toxic individuals learn something very quickly. They learn how you respond to pain. If they hurt you, you try to understand them. If they withdraw, you try to reconnect. If they behave inconsistently, you search for explanations instead of setting boundaries. And slowly, without even realizing it, the relationship becomes emotionally unbalanced. You give more patience, more understanding, more emotional labor, more forgiveness. At first, it feels like you are being compassionate. But over time, something begins to change. You start feeling emotionally exhausted. You begin questioning your own reactions. You replay conversations in your head. You wonder whether you said something wrong. And eventually, an uncomfortable realization begins to emerge. You have been carrying most of the emotional weight of the relationship, while the other person continues taking without giving much in return. At this point, many people assume the solution is simple: just leave. But anyone who has been in a toxic relationship knows it is rarely that simple. And one of the reasons for that lies in a psychological mechanism called intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful behavioral conditioning systems known in psychology. IT works like this. Instead of giving consistent affection, validation, or attention, the other person gives it unpredictably. WARM and affectionate one day. Cold and distant then. Caring today. Emotionally unavailable tomorrow. At first, this inconsistency feels confusing. But over time, it begins to create a powerful emotional loop. Because the human brain is wired to chase uncertain rewards. In fact, casinos use the exact same psychological principle. Slot machines do not reward players every single time they pull the lever. Instead, they reward them occasionally, randomly, unpredictably. And that uncertainty triggers dopamine responses in the brain. The brain becomes obsessed with the possibility of winning again. Toxic relationships often function in the same way. Moments of affection appear just often, enough to keep hope alive. A long conversation after days of silence. A sudden moment of vulnerability. An unexpected apology. Each small moment of connection feels like proof that the relationship might still work. So you stay. And you keep trying. Because the brain becomes attached not only to the person, but to the emotional highs and lows of the dynamic itself. This is also why intelligent people often stay in toxic relationships longer than others. Not because they are naive, but because they try to solve the relationship like a puzzle. They analyze behavior. They search for hidden patterns. They believe that if they can just understand the other person deeply enough, the relationship can be fixed. But toxic dynamics are not puzzles. They are patterns, and patterns rarely change simply because we understand them. They change when we change our boundaries, when we change what behavior we tolerate, when we stop trying to repair people who have no intention of repairing themselves. There are also several warning signals that often appear when you are dealing with a toxic personality. The first is emotional exhaustion. After spending time with this person, you feel drained instead of supported. Healthy relationships tend to leave people feeling calmer and more grounded. Toxic can also leave people feeling anxious, confused, or depleted. The second signal is constant self-doubt. You begin second-guessing your own feelings. You replay conversations repeatedly, wondering whether you said something wrong. You begin filtering your words carefully, trying to avoid triggering negative reactions. Over time, this slowly erodes your sense of emotional confidence. The third signal is unbalanced effort. You notice that you are always the one initiating contact, always the one fixing misunderstandings, always the one trying to maintain emotional stability in the relationship. When all three of these patterns appear together, the relationship often becomes psychologically unsustainable. And yet, even at this point, many people continue asking the wrong question. They ask, why do I keep attracting toxic people? But a more powerful question is this: why do I keep allowing them to stay? Because attraction often happens randomly. You cannot always control who is drawn to you. But access is different. Access happens through permission, through boundaries, through the standards we set for how people are allowed to treat us. The moment you change what behavior you tolerate, your relationship dynamics begin to change as well. People who depend on manipulation often lose interest when manipulation stops working. People who rely on emotional imbalance often disappear when emotional balance becomes required. And the surprising thing is that healthier relationships often begin appearing once toxic ones are no longer allowed to occupy space in your life. Healthy relationships do not require emotional survival. They do not require constant analysis, guessing, or emotional recovery. They are built on mutual investment, mutual respect, mutual effort. Two people choosing each other again and again, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. And sometimes the most powerful shift you can make in your life is this: stop trying to earn someone's love and start paying attention to who shows up willing to give it freely. Because the right relationships do not slowly drain your energy. They quietly help you grow stronger.